Welcome to the Cherland podcast, where I meet up with a musician, figure out what makes them tick, what kind of experience they're bringing into their own musical journey, and on today's episode, we have Kingflower, a.k.a. Garrett Langebartels. Garrett is responsible for actually a lot of the interviews we've had in the last year with people like Descolada, Arselia Kent, Kayla Phillips. Kingflower is a 5-piece American indie rock / Americana band from Indianapolis, Indiana. One is inside of the other. We'll figure that out in the first couple minutes. This band was formed in 2020 with Garrett and a lot of his friends, and it sounds something like Wilco, Ben Howard, The National, The War on Drugs, Radiohead. Garrett not only works with this band that he created himself, but he also helps other artists to make their own visions come true in Naptime Recording Studios, which he created himself. Garrett you can find as a freelance musician through soundbetter.com, or you can also reach out to him via email. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Garrett. There's a lot to learn from him because he's not just a good musician, but he's also a great collaborator and mixing / recording engineer. Hope you enjoy Garrett Langebartels, a.k.a. Kingflower. All right, Garrett Langebartels, a.k.a. Kingflower,
right.
Our Naptime Recordings Lord. How are you feeling this afternoon in Indiana?
Feeling good. Feeling cold. It has quickly become winter here, so busted out the sweaters, which I don't mind.
Winter means something very different from me to you, so can you tell us what winter means?
Yeah, like it was 20 degrees last night, ice on the windows. You know, days that I'm glad I just walk down to the studio and I don't have to go outside. But yeah, scraping windows and putting coats on if we have to go out. It's early winter at that. But yeah, I don't mind it. It's just a different season, you know.
Gotcha. You're gonna have to excuse me for my immense level of ignorance because I'm realizing it, and if I don't bring it up now, it's just gonna keep staying in my mind. The difference, because you're part of the indie music scene, INDIE music, you know,
Yeah.
but you're also part of the indie music scene,
Yeah.
INDY, which in my mind means the state of Indiana.
Yeah.
And then as I say that, I'm also aware that there's a place called Indianapolis. Can you just give us a quick geography, just so I know where I am?
Yep. So I'm from Indianapolis. In my mind, if you say Indy, most people here, I think, are talking about Indianapolis. People from out of state probably more often refer to it as the state as Indy, but you fly into Indy and there's like a big sign that says INDY, and you're kind of...
Okay.
The confusion is understandable, but yeah, Indy is, to us, it's Indianapolis.
Okay, which is where you are.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, you are in Indianapolis, which is in Indiana.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm about 10 minutes from the heart of the city, working class neighborhood outside the city. So.
Okay, great. You and I have been emailing basically for years at this point about different people that you have recorded and enjoyed, and you wanted to help them get on a podcast somewhere.
Right.
and somehow we started connecting people like Descolada, Devin Hopwood, Arselia Kent. They've all been on the podcast.
Kayla
They've all
Phillips,
mentioned
right?
Kayla Phillips,
Yeah.
yes. They've all mentioned you a ton. Can you tell me a little bit about Naptime Recording? Is it called Naptime Recording Studio? Is that what you call it? And like,
I just
did
call
that
it
start?
Naptime Recordings. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, how did it start? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. The story, as legend goes, started in North Carolina, where I previously lived. It was about 5 years ago. I decided that I wanted to take a shot at making music for a living. And I had just recently had my kid, Gus. He was like sleeping for hours and hours during the day. And so I was like, well, that's what I'm going to like start to sharpen up my skills with producing. And at the time I was making my first EP. And so that's the name Nap Time Recordings is where that comes
Love
from. And it kind of has a dual meaning because another name, people call Indianapolis Naptown. So,
Oh, why?
it's a sleepy little city in the Midwest.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's been around for a long time. It's not so sleepy anymore. It's grown quite a bit, but that kind of quickly grew over the course of about a year and a half into us, the pandemic hit, then we moved back to Indianapolis and got a house with enough room for a studio. I built it out myself, opened up in February of 2021. And shortly after that, we recorded the Descolada record here. That started 5 years ago, but I've been recording and making music since I was a kid. It's kind of a long time dream that actualized quickly. And
That's the same house that you're in right now. And
Yeah.
when you went from like, okay, I'm doing another job to now I want to go full time, like what was the you were saying that like while Gus is sleeping, you're going to learn
Yeah.
and like brush up on skills. Like where were you in terms, like obviously you're really good at recording and being like both a recording engineer and like a mixing engineer now, but like where were you skill wise? Like what did that gap look like between 5 years ago and now?
It was pretty big, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a very rudimentary like knowledge of recording equipment and what it actually looked like to make a record and make it sound good. I initially bought the equipment and was like, okay, I'm gonna make like my first EP by myself, and I'm gonna do it in our bed, my spare bedroom. It's a pretty common story, but like I quickly made friends with this guy Sam Locascio, and he ended up producing my first EP. And during that time, I started kind of like building my vocabulary around compressors and equalizers and kind of learning to understand the mixing process a little bit more. And I'm just kind of like an autodidact. I once I start learning, I just find more information and collect it and practice it, and I'm kind of obsessive. The whole time I was making that record, I was making demos at home and practicing mixing myself. And then over that time, I gained enough understanding of how to use the equipment. And then when we made the Descolada record, I was basically like, hey, Colton, I need somebody to practice on. Like, I want to see if I can make this work. And he was early, in his music career and didn't really have the resources to make a full record. So he traded me a guitar, and I spent way too much time mixing that record and like trial and error and sending him mixes back and forth. And then I made my partner Shea Farmer's record, and it was kind of the same process. And I feel like by the end of the second record, I kind of knew what I was doing enough to feel confident in starting the business.
When you say that you spent too much time on Colton's record, tell me what too much time means.
Oh my God. I was keeping track of time, and it was like on mixing, I spent like 30 hours on one of the songs,
Ooh.
Whereas like now I'll mix a song in 4 to 8 hours, depending on how many tracks it is, Occasionally that might push into another day or something, but more often than not, I'm mixing a record in 3 to 5 days, probably. So after a certain amount of time, I did decide to do this online mastering program, just to kind of sharpen up my skills. And I wanted to understand the process from start to finish, which has been really great because it allows me to be flexible to the needs of my clients and my friends that I work with. And for my band, it means a free album every time. I mean, it's my time, but that's all I'm going to give that anyway. So,
wow. Okay, so you're saying that I'm going to go back to the time thing, because I feel like that's kind of where the rubber meets the road for me, when I'm like, okay, so it took 30 hours, whereas now would take you 4 to 8, maybe more. Let's call it like 4 to 12 max. Where do you think that time was leaking previously? Like where were you tightening up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like most art, right? Like as a songwriter, for the first 10 years that I wrote songs, I wrote somewhere between 50 and 100 songs a year, and they were all shit, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know where any of those songs are, and it doesn't matter to me, that,
Yeah.
that time it was really just practicing. And I feel like when it came to learning to mix, it was just a lot of trial and error, and like trying to find my style and what it is that makes a song feel like it comes to life for me, and then learning how to marry that with the vision of the artist. So there was a lot of like, okay, I understand fundamentally what a compressor does, but how do I make it do what I want it to do? Back that off tastefully while maintaining the kind of industry parameters that I need to maintain to keep something so that a mastering engineer isn't going to be like, what the hell is this? Unfortunately at the time, a good friend of mine was mastering for me, and he kind of coached me through a lot of that. But yeah, I think I've always enjoyed a learning process that just requires time, that I move slowly and I want to understand it. And now that I understand it, I go into a session and I have a plan, and I kind of, a quarter of the way through the session, it might technically be mixed,
Mm-hmm.
It might be good enough to put on something, but the last little bit of the time is just listening and responding and trying to understand the song. And I feel like a lot of times you uncover layers that you didn't really hear before the farther you push into it. I think I'm looking for something now, and before I was doing that, but I was having to get through the technical elements of the record making process first. Whereas now I know what to do technically, and I'm just looking for the spark,
Got it. Okay. Yeah. If I was to give a guitar analogy, it's like when you're first like learning the chords, you're just trying to get your fingers there as quickly as possible, and you're not really you're focused so hard on your left hand,
right,
and like not making it buzz, that you're not thinking about like really making it sing.
Right.
You're just looking to do it right.
Yeah.
versus like do something artistic.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's like a guitar player when he first gets into like electric guitar, and he buys like 50 pedals, and he's like, why doesn't it sound good? And it's like, because your hands are bad. You don't know how to play the guitar very well.
Right. Yeah. That's fascinating. It's incredible. I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of time it takes to bring information from a book into your mind, and then into your hands, and then into your bones.
Right.
It's like that, like I just bought a trombone.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, I'm really starting to like horns. So this is something that I would like to like start getting involved in.
Yeah.
But I'm buying this knowing like, oh, this is like 5 years from now, this might be useful for me.
Yeah.
And like right now, I'm just like learning mouth shapes for the first time, being like, this is tough. This is an entirely new world.
Yeah.
When you were talking about like what makes it a record interesting sounding to you, like that is your artistic taste that you're trying to place on these records. And I definitely hear it when I'm hearing this Caverns record of like, there is a super particular like through line between all of these, which is I think your sound.
Yeah.
And I like the sounds that you're getting. They sound really good. I imagine they're all in your recording studio.
Yep.
And okay. And so like when you're like, we don't need to zoom in on like every particular thing, like every particular learning when you're like, oh yeah, I'd like the compressor for the snare sounds like this, or like, but like when you're finding your sound, what's like one of the things that you really zoomed in on and was just like, this I only want songs with this. I do not want a song that does the opposite of this. It has to be somewhere in this ballpark.
Yeah, a big thing for me is preserving humanity in music and and capturing the space that we're in and the headspace that we're in. So this record had a lot of room mics. There's a lot of ambient miking. Things like drum editing and vocal editing were kept to a minimum. There was a few sour notes I melodined, if I'm honest, but
Sure.
for the most part, I let the pitchiness ride. Yeah, it's a little bit of a reaction, I think, to where music's at right now. I wanted something that I wanted to listen to. I grew up listening to like Death Cab for Cutie and Radiohead and like the great indie rock bands of the early and mid 2000s. And that first Death Cab record was famously made with 3 of these AKG 414s, and there's something so vibrant about that sound to me. Another thing that I really wanted to bring was like, I love live music, and like there's a certain energy that happens when a band gets in the groove and is connected to each other, and they understand the music and they understand the vibe of the song. And I really wanted to bring that element into it. And I honestly, that's part of most of the records that I touch. I want there to be some element of it that has that like kind of euphoric energy of like I saw the National last summer, and it was like an out of body experience. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to to tangibly touch on what that is, because sometimes it's like think it's adding more room mics, and then I pull the room mics off and it feels more energetic, or it's like I want it to be all natural, and then all of a sudden I have a synth, and it's like the synth is what made it. But ultimately, I'm looking for that human element. I'm looking for something that draws something deep inside of myself.
Yeah, it's interesting. The live element, it creates a pressure,
Yeah,
like in the room, that I think like everybody, when you're having a good take, you hear you feel everybody like energy just continues to rise as the song goes on, because everyone's like, oh no, are we gonna mess it up, or like oh yeah, I think we're gonna get it. And so like there's an excitement in the room, I think, and that's important, like the energy felt by the drummer to like really go for it,
right.
like in the last chorus, when it was a really good take and we're really trying to get the oneer and being like, just go for broke, like get it if you can, and like that feeling of meeting your edge a little bit. I do think that is really important. With the Caverns record, looking at it as a record, I always like to start with the album artwork, because it is the most surface level and probably the easiest, hopefully one of the easiest places to start. It's kind of hard to tell what yours is, but I'm gonna take a stab, and then I want you to correct me when I'm entirely wrong. I see it like, I imagine I'm about like 4 foot 5 inches, and I'm looking at upwards a little bit to my right at like a door with like an opening that's like a rectangle, and there's like a little bit of metal guarding that door. The light comes in, and it reflects against like a mirror on my left, and I'm seeing both of those light sources, basically, one real and one reflected. Is that at all within the ballpark?
Yeah. So that's a photo that's, so it's close. Yeah. My childhood best friend, Blair Stevens, is a photographer. He's a multimedia artist as well. That's a photo of an installation he did, which is like a projector projecting onto a mirror. And so you're seeing the mirror, and then you're seeing the reflection of what he's projecting into the mirror. Yeah, I don't know how much depth there is. It's sort of like, I'm a very like feel it person. So I saw it, and it was like, that's it. That's the photo.
Yeah.
I don't know. I try not to second guess when I feel like something makes sense with the body of work. And I always loved that portion of his body of work and wanted to incorporate it in what we've been making art together our whole lives. So whether it's painting or music. So yeah, I love that photo, and I really love that it became a part of the record.
I love how simple that answer is, because so many people who don't do like art for a living, or just so many people in general, they like look at something and they assume all this intentionality
Yeah.
all the time. But like, just because you can't articulate like how it connects doesn't mean that it doesn't connect. You know, something there, you're stewing and thinking about this album all the time, and then all of a sudden you come across one out of a billion images that you've seen in the last year, and you think that's the one image that I'm going to connect with it.
Yeah.
And like, so there's some sort of internal knowing that's like going way beyond your reason to just be like, yep, that's the one.
Yeah.
And so much of music and like I think making art is just that intuition of being like, yeah, I don't know, I picked up yellow, I like yellow, I added yellow, and then I picked up another color and I put it in, I liked it.
Right. Yeah, I definitely like, I mean, I would say in a lot of ways that's a part of my kind of life philosophy is like, I'm going to see, like I'm kind of aimless sometimes. Like I have a lot going on all the time, a lot of projects.
A child.
And a child, yeah. Like, but I'm just committed to doing what interests me, you know? And, you know, I have a shallow background in studying religion, and I really love the idea of like the kind of mystic idea of the things that we feel and the things that we experience oftentimes lose meaning the more we talk about them. So for me, like the deepest things are better expressed through poetry or not expressed at all.
Yeah. You were saying a great point, which is sometimes the more we talk about things, the less they actually end up meaning.
Yeah.
It's a sentiment that feels vague and borderline snooty to people who don't experience it.
I would say those are my main two personality traits.
But so the reason why I say that is because it's something that I've been experiencing a lot lately.
Yeah.
Where I'm making things that I don't really have words around. And the only words that I had, I put them in the song.
Yeah.
And so I really don't know how to articulate it properly outside of that. And if I had other words, I would have, written it or just said it. It would have been a speech, but it's not. It's a song. And it's a very different medium. And at the same time, every piece of art, like every visual piece of art in a museum has a placard.
Right.
That tells you something.
Right.
But it's not always like about, what the piece is about. It's like, here's Garrett Langebartels, a.k.a. Kingflower, and he lived at this time in this place and wrote songs in a studio that he made, and that would be it on the plaque, and they'd be like, oh, interesting.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, I noticed on your record, you titled every song with a single word. Is that what was the intentionality behind that? If I can break the interviewer third wall here.
Oh, absolutely. The one of the collaborators named Josh, he was like, dude, you already have 7 songs with 1-word titles. Just make them all 1 word, man. He was like, he's like, if you're already almost there, just do it. And I was like, oh, okay, that works. He's like, it's just
cool.
gonna look. Yeah. He was like, it's gonna look visually better than just having these 3 songs, because it's like, one of them was like, So It Ends. He was like, just call it End, man.
Yeah, I love that song, by the way. That was a great tune.
Thank you very much. Back to you. Back to you and Caverns and Kingflower. You mentioned that you did a little bit of previous studying in religion and religious texts. I, in college, had a outside emphasis in Old Testament Hebrew Bible.
Yeah. So
I'm sure we have a lot of similar background in that regard. But in Labyrinth, Labyrinth has such a, first off, 10 points to Gryffindor for the line. You were the first time that I ever saw myself free from my body, free from my mind.
Yeah, thanks.
Incredible line. As soon as you said it, I immediately like thought of my wife and my relationship with her and this idea of like this thing representing this freedom you always desired.
Yeah.
And not only embodying it, but like welcoming you into it.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think that that's necessarily like particular to wives or partners or whatever, but like there is an element of love and admiration that like when you meet certain people, I have this with certain people in my life where I met them and all of a sudden I felt like, oh, I'm finally me.
Yeah.
Like that. I just think you said that so well.
Thank you. Yeah.
In the midst of Labyrinth, which is this idea of like narrator leaving Christianity, feeling lost, and like finding beauty in another place.
Yeah.
Is there anything about? I mean, there's a bunch of themes that we can talk about, but like, are there any themes in Labyrinth that you would really want to highlight, or and you can also like zoom it out like toward other songs on the album if you want to just like not make it so song specific.
Yeah. Yeah, Labyrinth felt like it was an important moment in my life, right? So I wrote that song. It's sort of about how my kid changed my perspective on the world and changed kind of like the bones of what our family looked like. You know, we went from young married couple to having this little kid in our life, and all while kind of stepping back from church. And like it was a very complex time of life, but ultimately one that kind of opened up my journey towards like finding happiness in life. You know, it's a song also that like I owe a lot to my band because I feel like they helped bring it to life. You know, when I wrote it, I knew that it was something that I had to record, but it was kind of one of those things where we started playing it, and within a few minutes the arrangement came about. It kind of touched one of those places in my life that sort of feels like I can't communicate it.
Yeah.
To zoom out and kind of talk about where that lands in the record. The record is arranged in 3 pieces, 3 movements. So the first movement is this kind of idea of chaos and the kind of disillusionment element. And it moves into what I call no man's land, which is where Labyrinth falls in the record. It's this kind of like melancholy, wandering. It's a little bit scary. It's a little bit dark. And then it moves into the letting go, which is the final movement. Labyrinth kind of embodies that central element of feeling lost, but feeling like I need to go into this kind of unknown space. That story is kind of about having a son who was born, experiencing the pandemic, relocating to my hometown, starting a new business. Like there's a lot of unknown swirling around in my life at that time. The impetus for writing that song was looking for a settling, but ultimately it led to learning to be open, kind of understanding the illusion of settling. So, yeah.
I like that.
It's a little difficult to communicate exactly what it means because all of my songs are kind of like that. Like there's about 10 layers to them. And I take quite a few liberties in tying other stories into songs, and I'm looking for that feeling again. Like, does this communicate a feeling through these strung together words and analogies? And
I think about the illusion of settling. I think that's such a better way to say that than like people, you know, there's all these colloquialisms that people lean on, like Garrett, the only constant is change.
Yeah.
And it's like yeah, I guess like stuff changes, like I get that.
Yeah.
Like but it's like it's so cliche that it doesn't help remind you what it was there for in the first place.
Right.
Which is like the illusion of settling, which is like anytime you think you have settled, you have lied. And it even relates to this idea of like settling on what a song is about and being like and like if you can say what it's about,
right,
in a sense, but that's not all it's about. And that's not what it's going to be about, like things change as time goes on.
I heard Leonard Cohen wrote 150 verses to Hallelujah. It's like that.
Right.
That song has infinite meaning. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Things change and songs change, and we're about to re-record a song from my first project called Skyscrapers, because it just feels like it needs to come along with us. It's got a new life to it. And yeah, I mean, I think that's why live music is important too, is you realize that there's more meaning to certain things, and that there's shared meaning and there's shared understanding of things that you maybe didn't even realize when you wrote the songs.
Right. I wanted to also bring up, because you're also, the sounds coming out of your place are just so nice. Like, I do think there's space for you to give some proper advice from somebody who knows. Like, what do you think that certain people in the future who like want to hire you or like work with you in the future, they're probably, a lot of them are going to be like singer-songwriters, people with a voice and a guitar. And when you put your 414 in front of you, you put your other mic on the guitar, and then the AKG for the room, it's like, it sounds so much better than other people who are doing that. So what do you think people are doing wrong when it comes to like capturing the sound of just a voice and a guitar?
Well, I will say that that's like one of the hardest things about making a simple song or a simple recording, I guess, setting up the mics in the right way. So there is some basic like engineering technique. We live in an interesting time in music history where all of the equipment, you can get world-class microphones for $600. Most people aren't learning how to use those microphones correctly. Learning that not every microphone has the same polar pattern, learning that not every room sounds good. If you're in a bad room, use a mic that is really forgiving in a bad space. And those are definitely things that I keep in mind in my space. My room is pretty well tuned at this point, which was a slow process. It was like, okay, I'm getting spikes at 3 and 7K, what does that mean? And then you go to research, it's like, well, that's typically reflection problems, so you need to add more sound absorption in your room. It gets pretty technical, I think that's the kind of person that loves to go to big commercial spaces, commercial studios. I like working in my little 250 square foot studio, and I have a drum room and the control booth and an amp room, and then a space where my synths and guitars and stuff are. But I didn't want to sacrifice sound quality, so I've put a lot more money and time into getting my room to sound great. I mean, a lot of it is just performance too. Like, I work with really good artists, if you put any microphone in front of Kayla Phillips,
sure,
it's gonna sound amazing. I'm making a record right now with my friend Jade Davidson. She recorded. I'm kind of just mixing it really, but she recorded the whole record on her iPhone, and it sounds unbelievable.
Jeez.
In that case, it's like, how do I control the roominess of this in a way that I can enhance it and make it sound a little bit more. It's going to always sound interesting and like it was done on an iPhone, but how do I make it sound like it was intentional and it's still professional? And I think that kind of like, again, it's like I want to capture the humanity of it. And I think a lot of records right now, people settle for 2-chord loops, and then they want to throw their voice on over it. And then they wonder why it's a flash in the pan hit, if it's a hit at all. And maybe it's naive of me, but like, I want to make records that become a part of people's lives forever. that deserve to be a part of people's lives. And I want music that moves people and pushes the cultural conversation forward and causes people to reflect and people fall in love over, like I'm not interested in, we kind of joke around here that I'm kind of a grumpy old man, but like for somebody that works with so much technology, like I'm not really that interested in technology being a part of the art that I make. I want the technology to be a tool, and I want it to, if it can help me communicate what I feel as a human, then it can be a part of what I do. But what I'm doing is ultimately human, and I kind of want to get as much of the technology not out of the way, but I want to be the user of it. I don't want it to use me, So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Something that I'm trying to constantly come back to as I learn more is this idea that better songs were made with less.
Yeah.
And for every new chord in your arsenal, for every new plugin that you get,
right,
there is an iPhone recording that can outdo you.
Yeah.
Because it is just human.
Right.
And it's showing off what a human can be, and people don't relate to plugins, people relate to heart.
Right.
And someone with a beating heart matters a lot more than someone with like vast knowledge of plugins,
Right.
Although but it helps to have knowledge.
Yeah.
Because where things are lacking, you can make choices, but but it is, yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely of the mindset that like we need to learn the tools, that we need to accomplish the tasks we need to accomplish. I'm an artist, but I think as much like a craftsman as I do as an artist. And a craftsman, they watch somebody, when they're apprenticing, they'll watch the cabinet maker make cabinets, and they're just handing them tools and cleaning up. And what they're doing is learning to understand how the tools are used, and then they get to do a simple task, and they do it slowly, and it takes time. There are no shortcuts to learning how to hear a guitar and find the sweet spot and put the microphone right there. I'm sure that AI will drive me out of a job eventually and whatever, but like there's a part of me that will always feel like, sure, it maybe sounds better than what I did or something, but it's not human. And I think there's definitely a value in using technology, but the craftsman follows the piece all the way through and learns how to make it, and every element of it has a part of their heart in it. And yeah, that's what I want to do. I want people to be able to experience, and the role of an artist in a community, I think, is to raise questions and express feelings and help celebrate and kind of have this like to touch those parts of our lives that are incommunicable,
I agree. I think I had a buddy the other day send me a text of an AI musician who's like just like put out their first song and is like starting a AI career, whatever that means. I do think there's a scenario where you do get run out of a job, and it's this idea of like, Garrett has such a particular sound, and everything he does sounds exactly like this, and he sets his compressors to these settings, and so at that point it's like, yeah, plug anything in, it's gonna sound like what you would do. But there's also a piece of you that's like ever changing, and it like I don't think anything else can track the small, almost unnoticeable changes in you over time, and that's like what being an artist and being a human is. There are things about you that will slowly evolve and change over time, and a Garrett song now is not a Garrett song in the future. So there is no, I don't know. I don't think that there is a way to program things we don't understand, which is like how people change over time. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. There's a few other things I want to get to before we end our time. Do you have interest in playing Labyrinth or any other song that
I can do that.
you have in the arsenal. Okay. There's that, and then I have a couple other questions I want to ask you, but feel free to.
You want me to go ahead and play it?
Some. Yeah, let's get it.
Still talking to Jesus the day that you met me. You were gracious and gentle in the way that you loved me. And I was still walking the labyrinth the day that you met me. Drinking coffee in the morning, toiling till evening. We were just fine on the other side. Oh, it was another lie. You came around and tore it down and built a castle near the sound. Smiled at the sunlight any chance you got. It was just Monday, that was enough. You were the first time that I ever saw myself free from my body, free from my mind. We were just fine on the other side. Oh, it was another lie. You came around and tore it down and built a castle near the sound.
Thanks.
Very well done. How I like to end a lot of these is by checking in about any books that you're reading that have been helpful to you. Books I'm in the middle of right now are Bob Dylan's book called The Philosophy of Modern Song, which is really good. And I'm also still working my way through Mike Senior's Secrets of the, like mixing secrets in the small studio.
Oh, yeah.
Those are my two at the moment. Do you have anything?
Yeah.
In that regard?
Well, anything by Donald Trump. I'm just kidding. My favorite author. A big one for me was I'm trying to remember the title. It's Jeff Tweedy's first book, Going So We Can Get Back Home, or something like that. Jeff Tweedy for me was from Wilco is a big inspiration because he's just a normal like midwestern dude that made it work and has made like a ton of records and has had lots of ups and downs in his career, but continues to push the boundaries and make stuff that's interesting. And I feel like as I read that book, I found myself, a little bit like I grew up here and the city has gotten really cool, but it wasn't cool when I was young. It was just a business city. So that book is great. I'm a woodworker, so I just got this book called 1,000 Chairs. And it's like the most old man book on the planet, but I'm obsessed with chair design and interior design, and
Wow.
it was really fun. It's like basically the history of all the like most influential 1,000 chairs over the last 200 years.
Wow.
So that's my dorky addition to it, but it's awesome. It's like says a little bit about the designers and what they're thinking. And
You would think that'd be dorky, but my wife was involved with a vintage store for like 2 years. And so I learned a lot about chair design, and she'd be like, "No, Connor, you need to sit in this chair because it looks like it'd be uncomfortable, but sit in it." And me being like, "Oh my God," and being like, "That's why this is the most expensive chair." It's like
it's ergonomic and yeah.
Yeah. Tell me your one of your favorite chair designs then.
It's probably more of like a category, I guess. But well, I'm influenced by two different kind of genres of chairs and furniture. I really love Japanese furniture. Japanese joinery is like famously awesome. It's super intricate, and I like to do things that slow my mind down. You know, I'm quite an ADHD person, and my brain's really lacks any kind of linear thinking, as you've probably noticed. But I really like a Japanese slat bench is just like one of the coolest. It's just so simple, but there's something about it that's tactile and like it's visually pleasing. It's not super heavy visually. And I love like almost anything by Hans Wegner, who's a Danish chair designer, who like everybody has seen his chairs ripped off by IKEA, but like the original ones just age so well, and they're so well thought out, and there's not an element of it that feels. I just love balance, and I feel like his stuff feels really balanced and soft and human, and you know, all the things I like in music, I like about his chairs.
It sounds, as soon as you started talking about that, I was like, God, you have the same music taste as you do chair taste. It's just,
I'm too predictable. Yeah.
I mean, but it's a beautiful thing to be in love with, which is humanity, you know, like this human element, this like these slow ancient things, you know, like it's, yeah, they're popular. They're popular for a reason. Can you give me some of the? You can go either best music advice you ever got or worst music advice you ever got.
My brother always said the best bands in town are the ones that are in tune. So tune your guitar. So take that to the bank.
That's classic. That's great.
Invest $100 in a tuner.
Smart. Yeah. Classic things like that. The other thing that I got from Tim Ferriss is 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So always have backups for when the one fails. Last night I was at a gig, and my main tuner was dead. My backup tuner was dead, and I had a third tuner somewhere in my backpack that I found, and I was like, dear God, how?
That's lucky. I do got, like, I always have a headstock tuner in my like emergency bag, but if my tuner went out, you know, at this point my ear is good enough that I could get it, you know, I could get it passable, but it'll bother me the whole set because it'll still feel off a little bit.
Right. It still probably would be off. Great. The other last thing I probably wanted to plug for you. So obviously the Kingflower album is out. Album is called Caverns, 9 songs, 3 phases. We got the chaos, we got the meandering, and then we got the letting go phase. 3, and 3. And then, but on top of that, you are also, you know, you mix and you rent out your studio, and you like help people songwrite and produce, and you'll like play on people's records. I found your profile on soundbetter.com.
It's old,
and I
haven't updated it in a while.
No, but it's, I mean, better, like, maybe I won't say your rates then for that.
Maybe I should log on there and update it.
Yeah. But, you know, as I do think people should listen to your record, and I also think that people should hire you because your record sounds really good. It's like,
I would love that. Yeah.
Anybody who likes the record, that it should be like the biggest thing, being like, oh yeah, let me listen to your record, and now let me pay you to get me those sounds.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to plug for you out there in California, all you California listeners, that I have Indianapolis overhead, so my prices are cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is great.
Yeah. I'm happy to play on any record. I guitar, keys, bass. I make records with people remotely sometimes. I mix remotely a lot. So
cool. Okay, great. And when is the best time to visit Indiana? Probably not right now, but when is the good time to come out to record?
Yeah, I think late spring, early summer is like ideal. It's the best Midwest. It's I do know people from California that think it's too cold still, but it's like mid-60s, sunny. It's beautiful. Yeah, everything's green. But yeah, I'll record anytime. Yeah, I do it all year long. I'm always here. I go down to my basement every day, and we joke that I'm a basement rat. So,
well, sweet. Well, Garrett Langebartels, thank you for coming on the podcast. Is there anything else that you want to plug before we close up?
No. Thank you for supporting indie music and indie music.
Yeah.
And for talking to all my friends, and I love listening to your show.
Thank you kindly for listening to the podcast. It's really just an excuse for me to meet amazing people and learn from them. So if you liked this episode, feel free to take a look at some of the other artists I've talked to, or let me know if there's someone in your life who's a musician that you'd like me to talk to next. You can learn more about my music at ConnorCherland.com, or find me on Instagram or Spotify under Connor Cherland, ConnerCherland. All right, see ya.